So keep that in mind. But that's a great hot take for me. So if you would like to make an argument for the alternative, please do. I would love to see it. That's not a challenge, but it's just like I like it. So we're going to talk about that seem in the literature to have, besides policing, been discussed most often. And again, these are really complicated. The way in which we're testing them is going to also be really complicated. Um, but the literature has emphasized these well, they've been discussed the most. They're the things that we've covered in sort of popular discussion scholar literature most of that. The first one is mass incarceration. You probably know this already, but the United States, at least up until like last year, had the highest incarceration rate in the world. There are a few countries that now have slightly higher incarceration rates than we do, but for a long time, we were incarceration nation. We had the highest incarceration rate in the world. We don't really know about North Korea. They don't really tell us. And there's some other countries that's kind of getting data on this also. But as far as where we're seeing it, well, probably in most of the world, the United States has had the highest incarceration rate. It's begun to go down beginning around 2015. So mostly because this is a really expensive criminal justice system for some. But incarceration, as controversial as it is as a topic, is probably the most universally agreed upon cause of 1990 crime. A really good exam question. What is the most universally agreed upon cause of the 1990 crime drop? It's probably going to be mass incarceration. According to one estimate, the crime drop would have been 30% smaller than mass incarceration. Mass incarceration, as you probably know, was driven in large part by really punitive and hard sentencing policies, federal level and elsewhere. We're incarcerating more people. It's not like we were arresting more people, it's not like we were convicting more people. It was that after you were convicted, we were sending more people to prison versus some alternatives. There's a little bit of an overgeneralization, but that's primarily that part. So you might be wondering, if labeling exists and individual level deterrence effects seem to be rather key. It's a really good question. A really good question. The argument, the best argument read, sort of counter the paradox, is that it probably has effects via incapacitation. And we see this especially with homicide. So basically what happens is, if you incarcerate somebody for, say, an extended period of time, or a say lower level, and you can keep them in prison for longer, you sort of stop the formulation of a criminal record. You basically stop the labeling effect, because by the time they're released, they will have been past the age of crime curve anyway. Maybe their absolute level of self-control will improve, whatever the case may be, they're desisting on their own. They're desisting on their own. So you're incapacitating them through the period of the life course where they're of the highest risk. So that's what we mean by incapacitation. It's not deterrence, and basically because it's so expensive, it saves off any labeling effects. So the effect of imprisonment is most pronounced among homicide offenses due to these incapacitating effects. It's preventing homicide from occurring by keeping people in prison and preventing the development of criminal behavior until they're past the age of not onset, but past the age of continual return, or when they're home. However, mass incarceration doesn't have many other types. It's a kind of non-linear effect, right? After a certain point, you might have reached a state at which you reach diminishing return. At that point, incarcerating yet more people might not achieve the kind of benefits that you did at lower levels of that same variable. So what we're seeing, this is the argument that have been made by some people, is that we sort of reached that plateau. Basically, we have no more, because we incarcerated so many people moving into the 2000s, that we have reached that plateau, and that is full. We're really not going to achieve any more substantive benefits from incarcerating yet more people. Something that's perfectly linear thing that goes up. Instead, it goes kind of up. That's kind of the is that maybe we've reached that point of diminishing returns, and that we get no further than incarcerating yet. One thing to talk more about later on in the course, we are sort of getting to the end though, is this issue of unintended consequences. Talk a little bit about framework, talk a little bit about negative turning points in life course, talk more about the effect of punishment on crime a little bit later on as well, this issue of collateral punishment. So there are thousands associated with mass incarceration as well. That we'll talk about. So mass incarceration, probably the most universally agreed upon explanation for the 1990s crime problem. The second one, very much about. The second one, which is building really nicely on the kinds of things that we've talked about already in this work, is labor market trends, specifically labor market groups. Scholars have long argued that there is a relationship between employment and unemployment in crime. And there are a couple of different theories and understandings that make this connection really sort of obvious. Unemployment is a type of strain. Perhaps that strain is even a characteristic of American society, maybe the inability to achieve the American dream. That strain, that gap between expectation and payoff, is something that characterizes the existence of a lot of people. So it makes a lot of sense to have crime and economic changes be co-occurring trends. It makes sense that we're going to see empirical linkages between these two things. Because as we talk about in this sort of slide, those things do seem to be related to each other radically. So what was happening in the 1990s? The business cycle was really, really strong. Even people who don't like to give Bill Clinton for doing the job of president sort of say like, well, this, I don't know how much business here, but people say like the 1990s was a time where basically economic prosperity, the overall poverty rate was lower, the job rate was things weren't looking too bad in terms of the economy. In particular, we saw job growth in specific areas. One of those specific areas is a greater availability of jobs for young, unskilled men. This is not a coincidence. Because young, unskilled men, we talk about tenure, time, it makes a lot of sense that when you see job growth for this specific sector, you're going to see declines in crime as well. This makes a ton of sense. You're going to see not necessarily the reduction of criminal incentives, although you might see that as well, but you're seeing a rise in a state in conformity. You have something to lose. And when you create something that is an investment, that is integration for individuals, it's less likely that those same individuals are going to be harmed. So it makes a lot of sense that as the market basically plan out criminal incentives decline as a result. You're less incentivized. You don't need to commit poverty crime. You're less frustrated. You experience strain to a lesser degree, and you have a safe conformity. A safe conformity that is this really important inhibiting factor, this control that keeps you in check. Is arguably the goal of all different types of social institutions. So you have people who respond to this strain, this potential strain, which may exist sort of perpetually, Merton is right, but who are responding to it in a way that's conforming. They don't need to be innovators. They don't need to reject the means because the means get them closer to the goal. The strain is weaker even if it's still present. You can still play by the rules and make a decent life for yourself. So you might as well just be a performer rather than an enemy. So engage in three priors, but consumer confidence is a really strong predictor of crime rates. Consumer confidence in the market, and that rose as well. So some could argue that 35% of crime got claimed by labor market strength during the 1990s. That doesn't seem like a lot, but that's huge. Have a single effect between 35% of variance is a massive effect. This is, I think, a reasonable explanation. It's one that's received less attention than mass incarceration, which is again why mass incarceration is something that's universally agreed upon. I'm probably personally more convinced by the connection between crime and the labor market. That's something I'll talk a little bit more about in the course later on. So that's the labor market. The labor market of the 1980s. That, the most exciting thing. The third potential issue, and it's definitely something that we've touched on already, is the phenomenon of Latino immigration in the 1990s, which expanded, especially from Mexico, between the mid-1990s and the year 2000. There are around 10 times as many, I have this number in health now. But it was right, I mean, slide. There are around 10 times as many I see more people in the US today than there were in Ukraine. And the greatest expansion occurred during the time of crime dropped. And something we talked about as we discussed this organization and the Latino is that cities that have the highest rates of Hispanic immigration have the largest crime drops as well. And this is actually, I mean, it wasn't just a random selection of people, as we talked about, random selection were coming to the United States in the late 1990s. Select group, and this select group is probably less crime inclined than sort of your average run-of-the-mill American natives. That's the idea, is that at least in part, this is what's going on. It's at least in part a conference of conventional values, well-by values, provides economic stability in ways that we talked about already. So this might be at least in part what's going on as well. Probably not all of it, but to be implied, crime rates and explaining trends in crime is going to be multifaceted. It's going to become, it's not just one thing. See, an argument, and it's just one thing, just like with a lot of the sketch designer testing, is probably wrong. It's definitely a multi-determined thing. It's a multi-determined thing. It's not just low self-control, it's low self-control and this other thing. So it's at least in part of this, but it's probably not entirely driven by obviously immigration is a hot topic right now. If you see arguments that are being made, like political tech arguments, connecting things with things, and they're making kind of empirical claims like X causes Y, be a little skeptical because they probably don't have the data to back that up. Science just takes forever. Whatever. So to say that something causes something, if immigration causes a reduction by court increase, it takes time to be able to even begin to assess. Yeah, just because it's the nature of science and data. Think that a lot of like discussions, political discussions about causes of crime are just political discussions. They're just like conversations that are typically not rooted in facts, which is this is so boring. That takes so long to do. That's another rant I'm not going to get into today. But I'm trying to, not to work here. But there's this whole area of science where the aim is to make it accessible to non-experts, like popular science. And Stephen Baker is kind of like in this camp, and other people also in the camp. And to stay, there's very little alphabet